Alright, today we are talking about solving two-step equations. This is Chapter 4, Lesson 5. A two-step equation, like the one above shown, which we can't see, contains two operations. So to solve a two-step equation, you use inverse operations to undo each operation in reverse order of the order of operations. So let's take a look. There are two methods. The first method is the vertical method. The second method is the horizontal method. And I want you to just primarily stick with the vertical method here. I think we can keep our terms straight by doing that. So here they give me the equation 3a plus 9 equals 33. Okay. Always remember that when you're solving for a variable, you can always check your solution so you know whether or not you've come up with the correct solution. All right, so the first step when we are solving two-step equations is you know that we're solving for the variable a in this case. So the first step that we want to do is get rid of any terms that do not have an a next to it. So here I can see that 9 is a term that does not have an a next to it on the left side of the equal sign, and the inverse or the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. Remember that when you are solving equations, whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, you must do to the other side. So here my 9's really cancel out and create a 0, and I'm left with just a 3a equals, and 33 minus 9 gives us 24. Okay. Then the last step here, I'm left with just one more step left. I know that this really means 3a really means 3 times a, and the opposite or the inverse of multiplication is division. So I need to divide both sides by 3. And now I'm left with just a positive a equals, and 24 divided by 3 gives me 8. So I've come up with a solution for this equation. Now, when you check your work, all you do is you take what you had, what the solution you have come up with for a, and you plug it back into that equation. So I really get 3 times, I said a was 8, so I'm just substituting back in, plus 9 equals 33. In this case, I'm following the order of operations. I know that 8 times 3 gives me 24, plus 9, which gives me 33. And here I know that 33 equals 33. There we go. So I found the correct solution. All right, on the next slide here, we're going to solve a two-step equation again. So I'm going to just rewrite it over here so it's a little clearer to see, a little bit more clear. So I get p divided by 5 minus 12 equals 20. All right, so the first step that we need to do is get rid of any terms that do not have an equal sign next to it. So I know that the negative 12 here does not have a p next to it, so I need to get rid of it. The opposite of subtraction is addition, so I'm going to add 12 to both sides. And when I do that, these cancel out and create a 0, which leaves me with just p divided by 5 equals, and then 20 plus 12 more gives me 32. Now, remember that this coefficient right here is a coefficient of 1. I really have 1 p right there. And if you're looking at this, you can say, hey, I know that the opposite of division for me to get p completely by itself is multiplication. So I need to multiply, okay, by the reciprocal, or multiply by the denominator. So the opposite, remember we've got a 1 right here in front of the p. So the opposite of division is multiplication, and the reciprocal one, multiplied by the reciprocal to get rid of that fraction, would be 5 over 1. So now my 1's cancel and my 5's cancel, and whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Remember that 5 over 1 is really the same thing as just saying 5. So if I multiply this side by 5, now I'm left with p equals, and this would be, let's see, 10, 15, 16. So p should equal 160. Remember again that you can take your time, plug 160 back in for p, and you'll find that you'll get the correct answer. Let's do one more down here at the bottom, okay? All right, so let's do maybe 2b. So I have a negative 16x minus 3 equals 2. All right, so the first step we need to do, remember, is get rid of any terms that do not have the variable next to it, which would be this negative 3. The opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3 to both sides. And when I do that, those cancel, and I'm left with a negative 16 times x equals 2 plus 3 gives me 5. Then I know right here that this is really a negative 16 times x, And I know that the opposite of multiplication is division. Well, if I divide by negative, 1/6, there we go, negative 1/6, I should be able to think in my head right now that I do not divide fractions. What do we do instead of dividing fractions? We multiply by the reciprocal, okay? So here, remember that this negative, you still want to get rid of the negative, so you multiply by everything except for that x, so that includes the negative there. So I'm going to multiply by negative 6 over 1 on this side, and by negative 6, and remember negative 6 over 1 is the same thing as just a negative 6. Now, these negatives, a negative times a negative cancels out, makes a positive. These 6's and the 1's cancel, which leaves me now with just a positive x equaling, and 5 times negative 6 gives me a negative 30. That should be your answer. All right, on the next slide here, we're going to solve equations with negative coefficients. I'm just going to rewrite the equation over here. 9 minus t equals a negative 34. Remember, the first step that you need to do is get rid of any terms that do not have the variable next to it. Remember that this is a positive 9, so the opposite of addition is subtraction, and whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I have to do to the other to keep that equation balanced. And it leaves me with, remember, this sign directly in front of that term sticks with that sign, so I'm really left with a negative t equals a negative 34 minus 9 more gives me a negative 43. All right, now remember that this is a coefficient of 1, and in order for us to solve for a variable, we have to solve and keep that variable positive at the end. So this is really negative 1 times t. So now I know that the opposite of multiplication is division, and if I divide by everything except for t on both sides to balance that equation, my negative 1's both cancel, which now leaves me with just a positive t. And that's going to equal a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 43 divided by 1 gives me 43. Remember, you can go ahead and substitute that back in and check your work. Which would give me 9 minus, and I said that t is 43, equals, negative 34. There we go. Equals a negative 34, and if I, there we go, whoa. Well, there we go. Let's rewrite that. 9 minus 43 equals a negative 34. Well, 9 minus 43 gives me a negative 34, and I know that negative 34 definitely equals negative 34, so I've checked my solution. Let's try one more of those. Here in A, it says negative 15 minus B equals 44. So remember, my first job is to get rid of any terms that do not have a b or that variable next to it. The opposite of subtraction is addition, so I want to add 15 to both sides. And after I do that, these will cancel out and make a 0. Remember that the sign before that variable or before that term is going to stick with that term, so I'm really left with a negative b, and that has to equal 44 plus 15 gives me 59. Now I can go ahead and take a look and understand that, remember, there's a coefficient of 1 directly in front of that b, so I'm really left with negative 1 times b. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I want to divide both sides by everything except for b to balance the equation out, and I'm left with b equals 59 divided by 1. Negative 1 is a negative 59. All right, next slide says to combine like terms before solving. So take a look on this side. I'm going to rewrite the equation 2x plus x minus 27 equals 3. So now we're adding just one more step. You need to understand, remember that this is a coefficient of 1 again in front of our x. So taking a look at this, I should understand that my 2x and my 1x, those are like terms, and if I combine them together, I know that 2x's plus one more x gives me 3 x's. Remember to go ahead and continue to write out the rest of the equation so that way you're not missing any parts. All right, then the next step here, I see that I've got a 3x and a negative 27 or minus 27. I know I need to get rid of everything that does not contain the variable, which would be my negative 27. The opposite of subtraction is addition, so I'm going to add 27 to both sides. And after I do, those are going to cancel out and create a 0, my negative 27 and positive 27, which leaves me with a 3x equals, and 3 plus 27 gives me 30. Now I know that this is 3 times x, and the opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. Now I'm left with just a positive x equals 30 divided by 3 gives me 10, so x is going to equal 10. Oops, there we go. Oops, holy smokes, let's just delete these. Okay, let's try one more of those. Here we go on the bottom. It says 4a says 4 minus 9c plus 3c's equals 58. Again, you need to recognize that negative 9c, remember the symbol directly in front of the term carries with that term 9c's and 3c's. Those are like terms, so I need to combine them. First, I'm left with 4. Negative 9c's plus 3 more c's gives me a negative 6c's, and that has to equal 58. Now my job is to get rid of any terms that do not have a variable next to it. This is a positive 4, does not contain a variable, so I need to subtract 4 from both sides. And after I do that, these are going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with a negative 6c, which has to equal 54. Okay? Now I know that this is negative 6 times c, so I divide by everything except for the c, which includes that negative symbol as well. Okay, now my negatives cancel out and make a positive 6, and 6 cancel out, and I'm left with c equals 54 divided by negative 6 gives me a negative 9. Remember to go back and plug in negative 9 into your original equation just to double check and make sure that that is correct. All right, on the last slide here, our word problem says Dion wants to go on a camping trip with his hiking club. The trip costs $199. He paid a deposit of $55 and will save an additional $18 per week to pay for the trip. The equation 55 plus 18w equals 199 can be used to find how many weeks Dion will need to save. Which series of steps can be used to solve the solution or the equation? All right, so the first thing you need to do is just take and rewrite that equation out, okay? And now our job here is to solve the equation so you can write the steps in the correct order that are necessary to solve. So I know looking at this, and I'm just going to rewrite it just a little bit larger over here, 55 plus 18w equals 199. I know that because looking at this on the left side there, I need to get rid of any terms that do not have a variable next to it or the w next to it, which would be my 55. Understand that that's a positive 55, and the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I need to subtract 55 from both sides first. Okay, remember balancing our equation, we have to, whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I have to do to the other. So let's go back and take a look at our answer choices. Here in A it says divide by 99. B says subtract 55, and C says subtract 199 from 55, and D says subtract 18. Well, the first step that we did was subtract 55 from 199. So B right now can be your only answer choice. Everything else is nothing that we've even done in the correct order. So knowing that, B has to be your correct answer choice. Oh, and I guess they didn't tell me that. They just tell me what the answer is. So let's see if we come up with the same answer as them. Okay, now I'm left with 18w equals 199 minus 55 gives me 144. And now the last step for me to do is divide, get w completely by itself or isolate it. So I divide by 18 on both sides. And after I do that, I'm left with a positive w equals, and 18 must go in there 8 times.